Hello everyone, my name is Abhijeet Menon and I'm lead solution architect GovTech. I hope everybody can hear me. Am I loud enough? Okay. So today I'm going to talk about developing cloud applications on cloud. No, I'm talking about local. So basically, don't want to go cloud day one. I want to do it locally first, right? So I want to develop cloud on local stack, right? So a little bit about me. So I am in IT industry for 19 plus years now. So and doing cloud for 12 plus years. So and in GovTech for a little less than 10 years, so 9 plus years. So hopefully next year it will be better on this part. So the goals of the talk, right, are three main important principles, right? So one is how can I fail faster and innovate better, right? The next thing is basically save time and cost. And the third one is faster time to market. So all three with the special aspect of doing things locally, not directly on the cloud. Okay. So my outline of the talk today is around why and how are we doing the development locally for the cloud. The next thing being a real scenario which we actually executed during the pandemic. The third one being how the potential benefits about it. And finally about the opportunities we have and the possibilities and next steps. So let me start with the real challenge in our current world. So basically, so any project development, let's say you have a project like life cycle of 6 months. So we start off always with the requirement gathering because you need to understand the requirement, what infra you need, what do you want to do accordingly. And based on that, basically the next thing is terraforming or creating the environment, which along this line, it takes around 3 months to come up with the infra. And especially in government environments, you have compliance to work with, you have governance to work with, that takes more time. So in such a scenario, basically, the developers only can start in the 3rd month or 4th month of the development of what exactly they want to do in the cloud. So to avoid that, basically, they have to do certain things on their local. So in the sense of like, you wait for the 6th month to deliver, there's no quality in your delivery. You don't have testing, you just have to deliver it faster because you don't want delays in your project, right? So there's no quality delivery on that aspect. So what we do with the cloud development is usually like you will create EC2s or containers in the cloud and you wait for the infra or network to be set up. Instead, you go back to local. So basically on the local, you have a laptop, you actually can install certain things of the cloud components on your local laptop so that you don't need to wait for the cloud infra to be ready. So what you do is basically you have all the things like localstack, Dockers, which you can actually install in your cloud laptop, in your normal laptop, and then integrate with CI/CD tools like Ship and Hats, which can allow you to integrate with cloud, which is AWS. So this is what we did. I will go through a practical scenario in the later slides, but this is something we can do, and we have done it over a period of time. So the next part is basically how does it help, right? It brings in flexibility. Every time, as a developer, myself as well, so you always need to have approvals before you go and deploy something in the cloud. But imagine you're developing something and you want to break, you want to do redo again and all that stuff. So basically, you can actually do things in local and do it without having to get approval. And that flexibility gives you more productivity and more quality delivery. Then the next thing is basically you can do local testing because most of the times what you do is basically you can do things on the cloud, but you cannot test it because you don't have enough environment to break and do it again. So in this case, basically you can do actually local testing from this aspect. The third one being with the development of serverless, with the development of containers on the local, you can actually deliver faster. It's the speed is important. I will share with you how we speeded up the development in a specific environment. Then obviously, CI/CD is the talk of the town right now. So basically, we need CI/CD for most of the aspects where we are actually talking about integrating and delivering in agile fashion, right, with shift-left mechanism. So let me share with you on a real practical scenario which happened during the pandemic, right? So if you see here, it might be very small, but you can see here basically during the pandemic, I'm at GovTech assigned to an agency which is part of the multi-ministry task force, right, to do certain things on the COVID aspects and we are a part of the IT team. While doing so, right, we had to come up with this very simple aspect of things, right? You have an API gateway, you have a Lambda, you have a S3 buckets, and you have a database. So this is a very simple aspect. But you imagine a person with the infra knowledge need to have API gateway knowledge, have to do the serverless knowledge, also have the database, which is a DBA knowledge. So to get the requirements and to do this stuff, which will take at least 2 to 3 months, and end up into a situation where the developer cannot wait, because it was a COVID situation, right? So basically, you cannot wait for things to happen. So what we did is basically go a little bit local. So what we did is basically we did use Docker desktop, and we use localstack in a Docker and a Postgres in a Docker. So what we did is basically deploy API calls with Lambda, serverless, and other things like S3. So you can actually use localstack to do all these things in your local laptop and work on all your business functions, which can be tested locally, which can be done locally and deployed locally, and then you integrate them with using CI/CD tools to deploy in the cloud. So while doing so, basically what we did is all the Lambdas, all the S3s, and all that stuff we actually created in our local, and we're able to deploy things with the business function. Imagine during COVID, there are file systems which, like the file exchanges which are happening, are continuously changing because nobody knows what the data is going to come like and which data is useful. So basically, in this sense, what happens is every time there's a change, I can break and recreate again without the need of going into the real cloud. I can test it, I can do things locally, I can make things work locally as well. So, and with this, there is a quality delivery which goes into the cloud at the end, right? So reduce approval processes, flexibility to deploy, flexibility to develop and test. So what we did is basically a very simple aspect. So this is basically for a rapid API deployment or development. We actually use something called as localstack. This is one of the tools. It's not the only tool available in the market. There are many other tools which are available, and some of them are open source. So basically, we just use some tool, that kind of stuff, and then we use Docker desktop to deploy the localstack as well as the Postgres SQL. And then we actually did a Terraform using localstack to deploy certain things at at our laptop. And then basically use AWS Local is a tool set which allows you to run local commands, the same AWS commands on the local. So basically, we can actually run AWS Local. And finally, we actually did assertions or tests on or APIs or other Lambda functions to make sure that whatever we are running is according to the requirements. Right? So this is just a sneak peek on what we actually did. You think like, hey, deploying localstack is quite difficult and you will have to do a lot of things. This is a very simple 4-step process. Like just to do a simple S3 and deploying a localstack with, for your file to be extracted and processed using Lambda. So the first step basically is to deploy the Docker desktop, like with the localstack Docker image. Then you have the S3 localstack, which is basically deploying the like S3 and creating this S3 with a specific location. You can actually go and give it a temp location if you don't want to delete or share the file across. So you can actually do that as well. And then you actually create a file, put the file. We used to get a sample file, like this will be the sample file for the actual production. So we actually created that file and deployed it inside the bucket. And finally, we created a Lambda using the languages like Python with a Python runtime. And then we can actually run the Python based on local stack accordingly. So this is a very simple 4-step process. Imagine the amount of time you would need to wait to get the infra ready every time. And with this, basically, you are ready and about to go for with your development. If things go wrong, no problem, just destroy this and recreate again. So you don't need to wait for things to happen, right? So basically, this is the most easiest stuff to do in your local, to be able to deliver faster, deliver with quality, deliver with more testing, and the way we want to, as a developers, we want to have the flexibility without going through approvals every single time. So, with that, right, I won't call it as savings, but we actually gained these 350 hours to do more things like testing, more quality delivery, more better ways of handling things. So we were able to deliver a better result. And I would be more than happy to say that we had very less errors and very less issues during this period, right? So we actually delivered the project 2 months before, even before the actual delivery date was provided. The code covered the unit test more than 80%. We used ship and hatch to go through the specifics, but the code coverage was more than 80%, which gives you a testability level of very good. right? So then the final thing, as I mentioned, because of all these things, what we used and we did it locally to test out the functions, the quality was better. So it was definitely a good experience in the sense of like how the whole team came up with this approach to deliver this kind of aspect with the quality delivery. So everything doesn't go smooth, right? Basically, it has its own pros and cons. So some of the cons, right? Basically, I cannot use this kind of scenario for things like distributed applications or dependencies like APIs. Like, for example, I want an API. I cannot emulate it. I can maybe create a stub, but I cannot emulate it properly in the real world. So then your laptop, like we were fortunate enough to get Macs, right? But not everybody is fortunate enough to get a very high spec Mac. So in certain areas, the hardware is a limitation aspect, right? Then if you have in real world, you change infra, then you have to change infra in your local as well. So basically that also creates some kind of issues sometimes. So, and obviously day two issues and incidents cannot be really replicated inside a normal environment. So I'll just go through the potential benefits of this. So first of all, we reduced the cost. We didn't wait for the development setup to be ready. We reduced the cost of development, and we actually created this environment on our local. Second is we could do it faster. So the developer didn't wait for the infra team to be ready, and there's no alignment required or dependency on the infra team to be completing the works. Then the performance of the application was tested because we had a case where we tried to start with Lambda, but we all know that Lambda has a limitation of running for 15 minutes. We could have actually tested it and local, and basically we found out that Lambda is not the right thing to do. Then we jumped into doing it as a container. So basically that is where you can actually fail and innovate better, right? Then basically from the quality perspective, we tested because of all these aspects of flexibility. The code was delivered in a very professional way, in a very better way with all the tests and 80% coverage of the tests. So the possibilities basically, as I mentioned, right, there are many tools available in the market. We use localstack, there is serverless, there is many other tools which are alternatives and available in the market, which are open source or paid as well, right? And they also help us, okay, we use it in a real scenario, but it's not the end of the story. You can actually use it in many different stuff. Like usually when we want to start learning AWS, you need a credit card, right? You don't need a credit card for doing this. You can learn AWS on your local laptop without a credit card. Then you can do sandboxing. You can do proof of concepts, which are very difficult to find to do on a actual AWS environments, right? Then finally, you can actually do a testing, which is basically doing a local testing of all the cloud components like Lambda, containers, or other things. Finally, as I mentioned, we actually were very fortunate to use Ship and Hats to do CI/CD using our local laptops to deploy all the Lambda and other containers accordingly. So on a last note, right, basically what I would just want to share is basically this journey wasn't a one-man army show. Obviously, there was a team involved, and the team actually went in to use different tools, different ways to innovate and do things faster. So it wasn't just doing locally, doing things in a better way. The idea was to give the flexibility to the developers like us to be able to deploy things faster, right, and with quality. And as I said, it was during the pandemic, and the need of the hour was time. So we had to deploy and deliver things faster. So the speed to market is very important. The third part is basically wanted to focus on cloud native. As I mentioned, it cannot be used for everything. So at least we have a specific way to look at things. At least we have a specific way to manage the performance, test the performance, check whether whatever we are using is the right thing, like whether Lambda or container or use certain other things to deploy things. So that gives you an option to be able to deliver things in a better way, in a quality way. Then the final one is obviously saves a lot of cost, right? Basically, you don't have to turn on a container and keep it on for the whole day. Here, you can actually create a Docker, deploy it, test it, okay, switch it off, finish already. So it's basically a local laptop. So you close your laptop, everything is closed. So in totality, is basically it helped. The important thing we need to know is the right design. Once you have the right design in place, what you need to do is basically to understand what is best suited for you as a developer. Is it a local development or is it a cloud development? It's not a silver bullet, but yes, it helps in delivering things faster and with quality. That's the crux of this whole talk. Yeah. Thank you.